There it is.
We are.
You are live. We are live, Ed. So now we can't have any bloopers or say anything stupid because there's people watching right now. Yeah. So I'll just wait a few minutes. I usually not a few minutes. I wait a few seconds in the interim. While people are waiting to pop on, let me just start off by saying good morning if you're in Orange County, good afternoon if you're in the East Coast, and good early morning if you're in Hawaii and wherever the heck time zone you are. Welcome. All are welcome here. Good morning, Jim. Counselor Jim in the house. Thank you for being a regular on this. So let me just do a quick introduction of myself and our guest while people are logging on. So my name is Param. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Buckeye Recovery Network. It's just a fancy title for someone who is really invested in different departments and areas of the company. I love that place. I love the people there. I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I'm a licensed advanced alcohol and drug counselor. I'm also in the program of recovery myself. Tomorrow, we don't have any freebies in this world, and we can't have any advances on it. But tomorrow, I will be celebrating hopefully 13 years clean and sober. So yeah, I know it's a big deal, man. Big deal for myself, especially for my family. Really big deal for my family. And I get to spend some time with mom, dad, brother, his wife, my wife, and have a little meal tomorrow together. But let me just get into our guest right now. So if you saw the comments or the feedback about today's talk, it was going to be a two-part series. So this is part number one, and we're going to follow this up with part number two. And what my intention is Ed is our guest. Ed is somebody that I've known for a few years now, and it's someone that I've seen in various capacities and various versions of him. And it's someone that over the course of these few years of observation, I've noticed a lot of really positive characteristic traits and who he is as a person and how he goes about his recovery process. And it's something that I wanted to come and be able to share with you because I know the family education support program means a lot. And there's a lot of family members that need to see this, especially the message that we have today. And he's someone that next week I'll give you the details, but I can proudly say I can consider him a colleague now and a coworker. So be in tune for what that means next week. But my intention for this two-part series is part one. Ed is going to be here sharing his experience, strength, and hope as it kind of attains to his recovery journey, right? And not just from the time he got the treatment, from the time that he was little Ed, the younger version of Ed, some of the challenges that he experienced in life, some of the obstacles he experienced in life, some of the pains, some of the things that caused him and led him down the road of drug use and addiction. And then I want to talk about his recovery. So what happened that he got clean and sober, why he got clean and sober, what was his motivating factors? And in this story, you'll learn that Ed was able to achieve some sobriety time and then lost it. And relapse often is a part of recovery. It doesn't have to be, but just know this, family members, that sometimes relapse is a part of the recovery process, and that is okay. And we're going to talk about his rise again to the person sitting in front of you right now. And then next week, his mom, which has been watching these family education and support groups from the very, very first week of it, she will be here with us in a triple screen. And she's going to talk about her journey of not just Ed's addiction and his recovery, but primarily her thoughts, feelings, emotions when it happened to the relapse, because that's where a lot of family members struggle, is when they feel like the rug gets pulled out underneath them. They feel like they were making such good progress, and then the relapse happens. It impacts them in such a significant way. So the mom's going to come next week and share on that. So all that being said, good morning to everyone saying good morning. Good morning to everyone that's going to watch this later on replay. Ed, you ready to do this?
Let's do it.
Let's do it, man. So Ed, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you're doing here.
All right. So for anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Ed. I'm 35 years old, and I grew up in Bricktown, Toms River, New Jersey. I lived there my entire life. And when I was about 33 years old, 33, I made a decision that, a very big decision that I wanted to live a clean and sober lifestyle. And I checked myself into rehab for the third or fourth time. I went to Texas, Scurry, Texas, population like 500. There's like nobody in this town. And, after I completed treatment there, they recommended me coming out here. And that's exactly what I did. And it was the best decision that I've ever made was doing that and trying something different. And for me, I needed that geographical change. I needed.
Let's rewind the story a little bit, right? So Ed, 35 years old from Jersey. Actually, I've been wanting to ask this question from everyone I get on the streams now, various streams that I do. What's one thing about the people? What was the name of your hometown?
I grew up in Bricktown, and I moved to Toms River, New Jersey, when I was like in my mid-20s.
Okay, so here's the question: from Bricktown, New Jersey, what's one thing about the people of Bricktown, New Jersey, that people might not know that you would like them to know? Give a little shout out to Bricktown.
From Bricktown, New Jersey. Oh man, they are the crew that I was rolling with. Are they're a crazy bunch of people. I mean, some of my best friends are still back there, and I talk to a couple of guys that are not necessarily sober but normies. But I met some of my best friends back there, and they share the same type of humor and personality that I have, and they're a crazy bunch of people, and I love them back there.
There you go. Shout out to Bricktown. There we go. So here's the thing, man. When you say at the age of early 30s, I decided to kind of commit to living a sober life, I want to rewind the tape back to the family members to know where the journey of addiction, alcoholism, drug dependency, all that stuff started. What were some events that happened in your life, Ed, that you can point back now and say, this is where I can see the dominoes starting to fall, and I started to gravitate towards addiction, or I started to use substances to cope with thoughts, feelings, emotions I had. Feel free to take us back to the beginning of the journey.
So it's ironic that we're doing this on the 12th of June. So 20 years ago, I was 14. I believe I was 14 years old. My father passed away, and I lost him at a young age. 14 years old is a very young age to lose your father at. And I think like prior to that, I might have had a couple of beers or smoked a joint, but it wasn't anything crazy. It was like one or two times or whatever. And then, when that happened, I didn't really know how to, I never really grieved it. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to do. I thought that I needed to step up and be a man, and I didn't even know what that really looked like. I thought that it was just like, I had no idea what it looked like at 14 years old. So, and that's right around the same time you're going to high school. And the guys that I were hanging out with were all athletic guys, good grades, but what their brothers and sisters were doing were, they were a little older, and they were, drinking every weekend and smoking marijuana every weekend. And me and my friends I'm an only child as well, so those are the people that I looked up to. And I wanted to, it looked like they were having a good time. So I wanted to try to have a good time. So right around that 14, 15-year-old age, I started, drinking and smoking marijuana regularly. And my whole life I was told that drugs and alcohol are bad, right? Don't do drugs and alcohol. Don't do drugs and alcohol. It's bad. And then I did them, and the effect that it produced for me, I enjoyed. So I'm like, are all these people lying to me? Like, I like the way that I feel after I drink. I like the way that I feel after I smoke. Have I been lied to? What else am I being lied to about? Right now it's like, well, if I feel good off of this, maybe I want to try some cocaine. And then cocaine's around in school, right? Or high school and parties. So then I tried that, and I loved that, right? That made me feel really good. And then I really felt like I was being lied to. And I think it actually goes back to when my father passed away. I remember the doctor looking in my eyes and telling me, hey, he's going to be all right. He's going to make it. He's going to beat this thing. And at 14, you take the doctor's word for it. And then he passed away, a few short months later. So I think I had a problem with trust right then and there. Right. And then the effects that drugs and alcohol produced for me that everybody told me were bad at the time were positive effects for me, because it made me escape my brain. And I liked the effects that it produced. And then I'm like, well, now these people are lying to me. What else? And it just slowly progressed and progressed and progressed.
Yeah, first of all, I want you to, this is maybe 20 years delayed, Ed, but my condolences for losing your dad on this day 20 years ago. I really mean that. I don't think time heals a lot of things, but a loss at that age for a 14-year-old is a very painful loss, especially because that's the time you're coming into this world and trying to become your own man, trying to self-actualize from a child to, a teenager to an adult, and not having that in your life is a really big deal, and it's it's a really painful phenomenon, by the way, that sudden loss, especially it's a loss with illness, with like you said, with the doctors telling you this, there's a lot of pain connected to that. And you named off a bunch of drugs. You named off alcohol, you named off weed, you named off cocaine. I want everybody that's watching this to know that all drugs of abuse are painkillers, okay? All of them are painkillers. Alcohol, before the use of modern medicine and all that kind of stuff like that, when someone had their arm amputated in a war, you see in the movies, they come and they take a swig of alcohol and they start doing some work on it. Alcohol is a painkiller. Marijuana, when people have some chronic pain, when people are going through cancer treatment, it is actually suggested by some physicians as a form of pain management. Cocaine, anything that ends with AINE, like Novocaine, lidocaine, cocaine, is a painkiller of the nerve endings. Now, why would a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid need to use so many painkillers? It's very simple, because that person is in pain. The human brain cannot distinguish between real or perceived pain. So when someone has a broken wrist or a broken knee or a broken ankle, the brain lights up the same way when they have a broken heart. So when a 14-year-old has a broken heart as a result of the loss of their family member, their parent in this case, they will use painkillers. Because what's another way of using painkillers is to be able to talk about it. He said he never grieved it. He never processed the loss. So that means he just suppressed it and suppressed it and suppressed it. Hanging out with a bunch of athletes and a bunch of guys in his school, their older siblings, those kids aren't talking about their feelings and emotions. Guess what all them are doing? Suppressing it and suppressing it and suppressing it. He's a boy, so by default of society, what are we told when guys have emotions? Suck it up. Boys don't cry. Suppress it and suppress it and suppress it. This creates, my friends, family members watching this creates the perfect brewing ground, like the perfect environment for addictions to start appearing in one's life, because it's a form of coping. So you said, hey, I knew they said drugs and alcohol is bad for you, but I like the effects produced by drugs and alcohol, is because it took away your pain. It's hard to walk around this world with a chest that's just full of pain. So if this alcohol helps me, if this weed helps me, if this cocaine takes away my depression, I'm going to keep using it and screw everybody else, because what they're saying to me is a big lie. Now, when did that go from it helping you to progressing to the point that it started hurting you? Because I've never met a person to this day that's gone into a treatment environment, a sober living, gone to a little town in Texas, like you said, for 500 people, because drugs and alcohol was working for their lives. So when did the solution begin to become the problem in your life?
So it was several years after that. I would say by the time I was like 18, 19 years old, I was working full time. I was going to a community college in the same county that I lived in, Ocean County. And I got introduced to like Percocets and Vicodin and stuff like that. And I liked, I took a couple of those and would drink a little bit at a party. And I wasn't really addicted to that. What I really loved was the cocaine and the alcohol. But then I remember down the road, these stronger painkillers came out, and I tried those and I really loved those. And that was probably around like 22, 23 years old. And the guys that I was a produce manager for a grocery store on the East Coast. Anybody that's on the East Coast, Stop and Shop, you'll know what it is. I was a produce manager for that grocery store. And, everybody at the store, my boss and everybody was doing these things. And I just thought it was normal. So we were doing them at work, and that's really where I became like the cocaine and the alcohol and the marijuana thing. I don't want to say I had a grasp on it, because I didn't, but it was like, it wasn't like an everyday thing. I felt like I wasn't physically addicted to it. I was addicted to, I wasn't physically, I didn't withdraw if I didn't have it or anything like that. But then when I started doing these painkillers, that was the first time that I ever felt physically addicted to something. And, I was always the guy that said, I'm not going to ever try heroin, or I'm not going to put a needle in my arm. I will never do that. I'm never going to do that. And I was adamant about that. And I meant it, looking back, I really meant that. But I remember one day I was at work and I was sick. I didn't feel good because I couldn't get my hands on those painkillers. And, the guy, like I said, I was a manager at the time, and the guy in the seafood department knew that I was into this kind of stuff. And he was like, I have something that's going to make you feel better. And he gave me some heroin. And, that was my first experience with it. And what heroin does is the same exact thing that these heavy duty painkillers do. It's the same exact effect, at least for me. And it's much, much, much cheaper. And from there on out, I was, addicted to heroin, which I thought I would never, ever do. And when I first started, I was sniffing it or smoking it. But then that gradually progressed into me, doing something else that I said I would never do, and sticking a needle in my arm for the first time. And that was the end of it for me, man. I did that for several years. And I say it like I was addicted to the needle. I wasn't necessarily, and the drugs, but once I used that needle, that's what I was really addicted to, like the whole ritual.
Yeah. So you guys, I want everyone that's watching this right now. By the way, if you have any questions, comments, feedback on the side, I am paying attention to the side chat too. So feel free to ask, and I'll make sure I ask Ed, or I'll respond myself while I'm doing this. But did you guys notice how at the age of 14, with the onset of a traumatic loss and pain in Ed's life, and it was so innocently using alcohol and weed because it just made him feel good. Like he was able to go on the weekends with his friends and feel normal. He was able to laugh, joke, be one of the guys. He was able to have the confidence to go talk to people at parties and this and that. It started off so innocently, right? However, because he never addressed the underlying causes of his pain, right? Because the avoidance of pain produces more pain. So you can't just say, my dad passed away when I was 14 and I'm okay now. It just doesn't, life doesn't work that way. It started going on to whatever he was using just wasn't enough. And he was saying, a few times that I wasn't physically dependent on alcohol, weed, or cocaine. I promise you this, that man was psychologically addicted to those things. Anytime he felt any type of pain, he would just go pick those things up. Would he have been fine without it? He would have lasted a few days, but he would have picked it up again.
And that's all it was a few days without it.
Oh, for sure. 100%. Yeah. So then because the pain's still there, right? I mean, it's like you can limp for a few days, but eventually you got to deal with the pain again. So when he said he started painkillers and the strong painkillers that are out there, I mean, for those of you who are watching, this would be kind of the Percocets and the Roxycontins and the Oxycontins and there's that whole world. What was there anything else like Opanas and stuff like that, or?
It was like you said, pretty much the Roxycontins and the OC80s and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we were talking about alcohol, weed, and cocaine being painkillers. Well, these are actual painkillers that are prescribed for severe physical pain by doctors, and the brain can't distinguish between real or perceived pain. So the reason why Ed took some painkillers and all of a sudden was like, I'm okay now, is because that pain medication was something that was helping the emotional pain that he had. And, a lot of opiate addicts, and at this point, Ed is considered an opiate addict at this stage of his addiction that he's talking about. Opiate addicts describe the feelings produced by opiates as a warm hug that they really, really craved and want and need, that either they never gotten or haven't gotten in a long time. So now listening to Ed's story here, 14 losing his dad, the opiates, I know this sounds far-fetched for some of you guys that won't understand the phenomenon of addiction, but for people like Ed, opiates produces this warm sensation of almost a feeling of love. And it could be experienced in the form of the mind and the body. And that's why they continue using it, because it's a feeling that they've been lacking or missing for a long period of time. And you're wondering, well, how does it just jump from pain meds to heroin? Well, unfortunately, that's a true story for many people that are using pain medication. Ed talks about the costs. The costs they're unable to keep up with it, and then the effect produced by it. And why does it go from sniffing it to smoking it to mainlining it? That is also a progression that happens. So that innocent 14-year-old that was smoking some weed to take his pain away is now, in Ed's word, addicted to the needle, not just the opiates, addicted to the needle. And that's the progression of addiction. By the way, the next progression after that is 6 feet under, right? It's either sober, go to jail and prisons, and then 6 feet under, or one of the combination of those, man. So he chose the sober route. So once it got to that stage, Ed, tell me about your journey of trying to get sober. You said there was a free treatment episode. So walk us through. Was it therapy? Was it outpatients? Was it inpatients? What'd you do?
So I did a whole bunch of, outpatients in town, which, I would go there and, just to make my mother happy at the time. Really, I had no interest in being sober. I would show up high or drunk, whatever it was, leave, walk out, and just never go back. I remember I went to a detox in Bergen Pines, New Jersey, which is northern New Jersey. And it was like a hospital setting. It was on the 3rd floor of a hospital. And I pulled up and it was this beautiful place. But then you get to the 3rd floor and it looked like it was from like the 1930s. And you were just in like a hospital bed. And I went there again just to please my mother, please my family, with no intent on actually, I did want to stop painkillers at that time, but no intent to actually stop drinking or drugging or anything like that. I remember the day I got out, I was smoking weed again, and slowly it progressed right back to my old ways. When I was about, I'd say 28, 29 years old, something like that, maybe 30, I owed my drug dealer a nice chunk of change, and I didn't have the money to pay him. And I was trying to come up with a plan to get out of like, what am I going to do? And again, not for the right reasons. I checked myself into a rehab. I told my mother I needed help, and I went to a rehab, the same one in Texas, for the first time. But again, the only reason I went there was to get away from the guy that I owed a whole bunch of money to. So I came back and very quickly fell back into my old ways again. And then I went home, and, what it took for me was, my mother changed the locks on the doors, right? I went home, tried to get in one day, and all the locks were changed. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, the people that were closest to me wanted nothing to do with me. The guys that I spoke about at the beginning of this, the good friends that I call my best friends back home, they wanted nothing to do with me. I was living in a hotel room with a female who pretty much I met on the streets. If we could afford a hotel room, or we were sleeping in my car, in the Target parking lot. And, that went on for probably like 9 months to a year, like that, like get in a hotel room, maybe not get in a hotel room, sleeping in the car. And I remember one day I was at this, trap house, and I remember looking around, and there were bottles filled with urine, and there were syringes all over the place. And, it smelled like cigarette smoke, and all these people lying around. And I just remember looking around and saying, man, I deserve better than this. And I got in my car and I drove to the Wawa down the street, and I called the treatment center in Texas up, and I said, hey, I need to come back. I'm struggling. And for the first time in my life, it was Ed wanting to get sober for Ed. It wasn't me trying to please my mother or please my family or run away from my own problems, like owing my dealer money. It was, I needed help. And, I was on a flight the next morning to Texas.
Yeah, man, that's it all started from your mom locking the doors.
Yeah,
based on what you said right now, you went back and you trying to. And your mom, by the way, for those of you who are watching this right now, she'll be here next week. Lynn is her name. She'll be here next week to talk about her perspective of what was happening here. Ed has his perspective and she has hers. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a lot of similarities, but there's certain thoughts, emotions, feelings that family members go through. Just the decision to change the locks, right? So Ed's talking about when she changed the locks, I realized like, oh my God, I can only be with this one girl I just met, sleeping in my car at Target. The whole world opens up completely differently for him over there. But for mom to go through that, I bet you she went through so many times. Should I do it? Should I not do it? What if I keep the doors locked and he dies in the streets? What if people think I'm a bad mother? What if I feel like I failed him? What if, all that? There's so much that goes through that decision. So I really look forward to hearing that perspective next week. But so you got out, you went to Texas, then that's the part of your journey after you completed treatment there. I believe that myself and our team had a chance to meet you for aftercare, correct?
Yes, correct.
So tell us what that was like for you, because I titled this one "The Rise After the Fall," right? So for those of you who are watching right now, we haven't even described the fall component that I really wanted to highlight. But tell me what that first round of true sobriety for you was like once you came out here, and go for it.
So I like I said, I knew I wanted to be sober. And when I came out here, they told me a couple of things. It was, be open, be honest, be willing, try something different, take suggestion. And that's exactly what I did. I did all of those things. I felt I got uncomfortable. And I did things that I wasn't used to typically doing. I was a yes man. Like if you asked me to do something like, hey, do you want to go to this sweat lodge with a bunch of, Native Americans? And I did that. Right. And it was fun. And I started doing all these things. I was going to 90 meetings in 90 days and I continued to go to the meetings. I got a sponsor. I worked the steps. I started doing really well. I felt good. I had my mother back in my life. She was talking to me and my friends and my family were saying, hey, you're doing great. You're doing great. Keep it up. And I made a lot of friends out here that I still are, these are my real friends out here. And I've only known these guys for a couple of years, but these are my real friends, the guys that I've met out here and the women. But yeah, I just took suggestion and I was open, honest, and I worked a program.
Let me ask you this real quick. Cause there's some family members watching this that their loved ones are a little bit younger. They're like, early 20s, 22, 23, 24, that kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
When you say I came out here and I was a yes man, I did what was suggested. I did what was recommended. I went all the meetings, I, followed the direction. If you were 23, 24, 25, sharing your story the way you shared it, did you have this level of willingness, motivation at that time?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Yeah. And if someone was telling you to do all these things, like, did you feel like you had to go through that next chapter of your life in order to get to this level of willingness?
For me,
yeah,
yes.
For you.
For me, yes. Yeah. But I don't think that everybody necessarily has to. I have friends that came out here that didn't want to be sober. They didn't, and they just started doing this stuff because they had to. And now they have multiple years of sobriety and they're happy like this. So for me, that's what I needed. That's what I needed.
And everyone's journey, I mean, people that listen to me every week, they know that I'm a big advocate of the fact that everyone's healing journey is unique and it's their own. No two thumbprints are the same. Therefore, no two recoveries will ever be the same. And I really believe in that stuff. So how long were you able to stay clean and sober? I know you started even working in the recovery field at a structured men's sober living, so you kind of like, that's how well you did in your recovery. So from the outside, from mom watching, your supporters watching, it's like, oh my gosh, he's sober. How long did you have sober?
So when the fall happened, I had about 10 months, 11 months, something like that. So
this is someone with 11 months of sobriety and not just like counting days, like doing the deal, right? Even got a little opportunity to manage a little sober living as one of the, the live-in house managers. And from everyone on the outside, they're like, oh God, those days are behind us now. He's done. He's moved forward. He's come a long way. And then tell us what happened there around that 11 months.
So around that 11 months, I got comfortable, and I think my brain was playing tricks on me. It's like, oh, I got this. I have 11 months. I almost have a year. I was, like you said, I was managing a sober living, and for me, what happened was I lost my own program, and I sort of let my program become my job. And I was just sort of going through the motions, and I stopped taking suggestion, and I stopped calling my sponsor, and I stopped going to my own meetings, and I stopped praying and meditating. I stopped doing all these things, right, that I was taught that I needed to do to stay sober. I stopped doing all little by little. It was like one thing here, one thing here, one thing here. And I felt good for a little while, right? And I was like, oh, see, I just stopped doing that and I'm still sober. And then I stopped doing that and I'm still sober. And that went on for like a month and a half. And as a house manager, sometimes you catch people that may be using, right? And I happened to find something in the house, and I put it in my safe, and it sat in my safe for about a week and a half, and every time I opened my safe, I saw it. And in retrospect, I should have discarded of it. I should have flushed it. I should have given it to my boss. I should have done a whole bunch of different things. But I thought that I was at a good point in my sobriety where I didn't need to do that and I could just leave it in there. And looking at that every single day without doing the things that I was taught to do on a daily basis if I want to be sober. One morning I woke up and I said, hey, man, I'm going to do it. And I woke up and I did it. And, after that was gone, I went out and on the streets and I got more. And that went on for, 24 hours straight. 24 hours straight. I was getting loaded.
So now you guys can see why next week when I want to bring Ed's mom here with us, because that moment that it seems at this point in the story, at least that moment, it's like all that progress that was made. It's like, what happened to it? Right. And the family now is worried because, oh my gosh, is this going to be another round of everything we've experienced for the past decade and all that kind of stuff? But tell us, Ed, because here's the thing. I want everyone to know this, that the same way we talk about addiction being progressive. So a lot of times people pick up where they left off with their addiction. That's why with the opiate addicts, there's such a high risk of death and overdose, because they tend to use the same amount of drugs they were using when they were highly addicted after a time of sobriety. Did you use opiates at that point?
I did not.
You did not.
That was
probably saved your life.
What's that?
That probably saved your life, by the way, not relapsing on opiates.
Absolutely. It was methamphetamines, which wasn't even really my thing.
Yeah.
But I'm an addict and
so I'll tell you guys this is like the recovery process, my friends, hear this from me, is also progressive. When people choose to re-engage back in the recovery process, they don't lose all of that previous experience they had. Now they have to learn from some of the reasons and the causes that Ed, shared about over here about why he ended up relapsing. They have to take from that, or else the lesson's going to keep repeating itself. But we can pick up where we left off. So Ed, what did it take for you how long were you out for? And what did it take for you to get back in? Because now you're a house manager. I mean, I know it's a support staff role and it's just it's a paraprofessional, that is what that role is. It's kind of like a peer support, but one level higher. Okay. But you're still being looked at by the sober community as someone that's leading people, someone that's doing well in the recovery community. In a relapse, you automatically lose all that status, right? You automatically become a newcomer again. So you're no longer that. Yeah. And now there's a form of guilt and shame that gets created, not just because of the relapse, but because you lose that what you worked so hard to gain. And that's where I've seen a lot of people have a hard time reintegrating back in the program, but you got back in it. So tell us about what that journey was like for you to get back in, clean and sober, do the work, all that kind of stuff. Walk us through that.
Yeah. So it was, like you said, the guilt, the shame, it was super humbling for sure. My boss at the time, knocked on my door and he said that he heard that I was acting weird, which I'm sure that I was. And he came in and he said, what's going on? And after me trying to tell him that I wasn't high at the time, the first time I was like, no, I'm not high. But then I got honest with him. And he was like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to detox? And I was like, yeah. I knew that I wanted to be sober. I didn't plan to relapse. Like this wasn't, I didn't have some what do you call it? I didn't have a reservation. Thank you. I didn't have a reservation to use. Like it wasn't a plan. And I still wanted to be sober. So when he asked me if I wanted to go to detox, I said, yes, absolutely. And I went to and did a detox. And he's like, are you willing to come back and do what we ask of you? And I was like, yeah, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And, I went from being a manager of that sober living to a client again, sharing a bedroom with a couple other men, and paying rent, which was something that as a manager, you didn't have to do. Right. And he was like, we're going to put you in nighttime IOP. Are you willing to do that? And I said, yeah, like I said, I'm willing to do whatever I have to. And so I came back as a client, paying rent, sharing a bedroom with other men, doing nighttime IOP. And he took a lot of times when you relapse, you get put on restriction, you get your phone taken away, your vehicle taken away. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a vehicle. I went through all the same things that anybody else would go through. But like I said, I knew that I wanted to be sober, and I was willing to do whatever I had to do to get back to where I was. And in retrospect, it was terrible at the time, and I was beating myself up. Why did this happen? Like you said, the guilt and the shame. Why did this happen to me? But in retrospect, that relapse for me made me learn so much about myself, and made me realize, what I stopped doing on a daily basis and what I need to continue to do on a daily basis if I want to stay sober. And that's what I've been doing on a daily basis since that point. And I'm not perfect. There might be days where I don't pray, or there might be a meeting that I miss. But today I'm able to be self-aware, and self-awareness for me is huge. And I'm aware when I'm not doing something, or I have a close group of friends that can call me out on something, and I can correct it.
And let people know, how long has it been since that? Like, how long do you have clean and sober now?
15 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. 15 months, something like right around 15 months. Give or take.
Sure, man. That's, I remember when you were 4 months clean and sober, I was asking the family members in this family education support group to send me their questions. And your mom actually sent me a question, which, I'll bring up with her next week. But she said, "Hey, I'm so happy that Ed has, 4 months clean right now, but I'm so worried because I'm so scared. What do we do? Because I just can't trust him right now because of everything that just happened and all that kind of stuff like that." And I told her straight up, I said, just continue engaging in your recovery process, in your personal recovery process. Keep coming back here. Keep learning more about your own self-care, your own communication, because here's the thing. I want all family members to know this. Like, we don't know what happens with human beings going through addictions and recovery. We just don't. However, you do know as a family member that you do have control over what you do, how you go about this, how you engage with this. And that's the only thing you can control, because here's the thing, regardless of what your mom would have done or didn't do, you did what you needed to do. Like, regardless of that, right? It's like, whatever she wanted to do, you did what you needed to do. I mean, for those of you guys who don't know, Ed has this wonderful meeting in his own apartment every single Wednesday. That's just like so well attended. And he's such a pillar of recovery and support in our local community for men. It's like a men's meeting.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like a men's meeting. They just go there, and it's like this brotherhood that's been created out here, and it's fellowship. And you think about it, 14 months of pure sobriety after 11 months of sobriety and a relapse that had him lose all that he had gained, except the parts of his recovery that he was able to pick up where he left off. And there's a couple of family members that talked about that. So I will tell you this before I start pulling up some comments for us and kind of bringing in a little bit more interaction into this, is what do you have to say, Ed, to somebody, another Ed out there, or another guy or girl, doesn't really matter, who has achieved a level of sobriety, right? Has got sobriety. What I mean by that, it doesn't have to be 11 months, right? It could be a month, it could be 5 months, it could be a few weeks, it could be a few years, but they go through the relapse, right? They experience relapse. What would you tell to them? Like, what are some nuggets of advice, suggestions you have to that person to help them get to where you got to? Because where you got to is impressive. It's helped you get, like I said, to become one of our colleagues, which is something that I can't wait to talk about next week. But what would you say to them? What would be your advice? Because who else to give that advice than someone who's done it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know it's probably hard to hear, but don't beat yourself up. Try to stay out of the guilt and the shame. Don't throw yourself a pity party. Get back up on your feet and continue doing what you know you need to do. And again, I know that it's extremely hard to hear, especially at the time of a fresh relapse. But get back up on your feet and take the right steps on what you were doing, because you know what you need to do. Now it's just a matter of action, putting in the action, putting in the work, and doing the next right thing. Don't beat yourself up. It could be a very pivotal point in your recovery. And you can learn from that. You can grow from that. And one day you'll be able to help somebody else out, hopefully like I am, that's going through something similar.
Right on, man. And the fact that, you know that the relapse caused you to lose trust, like you caused your family to lose trust in you. I know that's a hard pill to swallow, because you gained all that back, right? You gained all that back, and then you gave it away so cheaply, if you will, even though you got a lot of that experience. But how long did it take for you to feel like you were able to regain the trust of your mom, which I know trusts you today. I do know this for a fact. I saw when she was here in town not too long ago and you guys were just enjoying a beautiful weekend together, whatever it was. Like, I could just tell that there's a lot of trust that exists between you guys. Yes. But when you lost that, how long did it take to gain it back?
I would say several months, you know what I mean? And like, if I don't call her regularly or she doesn't hear from me, I can't speak for her, but I guess we'll know next week. Like, I still think that she's like, oh my God, did he drink? Did he use? Did he do this? I'm sure that the worry, maybe not to the extent that it was, but I think that it's still there. But me and my mother today have a great relationship. She trusts me today. I talk to her regularly. And yeah, we have a great relationship, but I would say definitely several months before we had that relationship. And matter of fact, today, 3,000 miles across the country, I have a better relationship with her than I ever did when I was living in the same town or house.
That's really, really cool, man. So I'm going to pull up some, and I look forward to having your mom here. She really has been a big supporter of this family education stuff from week one. So I'm going to pull up some comments here. This one, Debbie, she's also been around with your mom this whole time. She just said, thank you so much for sharing. The more we hear your story, the more we continue to hear how common this path is for so many. And this is the path of just the progression of addiction, you know, and they were impressed how you overcame it. There's some more follow-ups they have there, but my mom said, I admire you, Ed, for your honest and courageous sharing. It will help a lot of people in recovery world and their families.
Awesome. And
then this part right here, Debbie talked about, and I want to share. She said, did you ever, Ed, find yourself stuck in the middle of the recovery tunnel, or did you make it through moving forward the entire time? So this was before we talked about your relapse, you know?
Okay.
So it was right before you were talking about that. But do you remember my recovery tunnel analogy? Okay. So what everyone else that's watching,
halfway there and back, right?
Yeah. So what happens is, Ed was walking in the recovery tunnel, Debbie. He was pumped. He was excited. He was making progress. He went 10 months. He went 11 months. He's still going forward. And then Ed said he stopped doing the things he was doing because he was working in recovery and he wasn't seeing a life outside of that was like exciting him and motivating him, right? So like, remember he said he had trust issues too? When the doctor looked him in the eye and said, your dad's going to be okay. And his dad wasn't. And when society told him certain things are bad and it didn't feel like it was, like he already had these trust issues and instilled in him. So when the Parhams of the world and the counselors of the world, the Adrians of the world, whoever was your counselor says, hey, just keep moving forward, life's going to get better. He's like, I kind of don't trust you guys. You know, this might have been happening subconsciously, but he stopped in the middle of that tunnel. He stopped doing the things he was doing. And then he slowly but surely started to regress, right? So stagnation is when we stop. Regression is when we start taking steps backwards. And when he started taking steps backwards, he looked behind him where the recovery tunnel started, and he saw a little bit of light. And that was in that packet of that methamphetamines that he was talking about that he had in the safe. And when he used that, man, it's just a straight sprint to the back. However, the next question over here that Dan had, which is obviously his last name, so you can tell there's a relation there. Appreciate you guys. Very, very appreciative of your support every week. He said he did not know that you can pick up where you left off in the recovery process. That's encouraging. I believe that wholeheartedly, Dan, that you can pick up where you left off.
So
go for it.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So the knowledge that I acquired up until those 11 months, I still had that knowledge. I had to reset the clock and reset the clock on my sobriety time, but all of that knowledge that I had gained in the recovery process was still right there for me. So I definitely think I believe that as well.
And let me ask you this question to follow up on that. The quality of your sobriety the second time around, is it better than the first one? The quality of it?
Yes.
Okay. So I want everyone to hear this. And I know that's a leading question. I was hoping you're going to say that. If you would have said no, I'd be like, shit. Okay. I knew you were going to say yes, because I've done this enough times, Ed, to know this, that the quantity of the days do not matter as much as the quality of them. Mm-hmm. So if Ed would have had continuous sobriety, but the quality of it was just like he was always feeling like he's going through the motions and dragging his feet and just not excited, I'll take this version after a relapse than that version, even though that version has more time involved with it. Time meaning sober, abstinence time. So don't ever underestimate the quality. Quality over quantity sometimes really, really matters. Then I really admire your courage and strength, beyond impressed. So you're an impressive man these days, Mr. Ed. Eileen, which is also related to that family right there. We also had a question. So Ed, I so admire your courage to keep moving forward after stumbling. Did you ever do family counseling during the process to help gain family trust and family healing?
No, I did not. So my mother comes to the family with Parham, and I did groups with Parham, but together, no, I did not.
What about when you were younger?
No, my mother always wanted me to do that, and I always said I didn't need it, which evidently I definitely did need that, and it was just something that I wasn't willing to do it at that point in my life.
Oh, I'll definitely, to anyone watching, if a 14-year-old's going through a traumatic loss like that, I know they're the last person that wants to do it, but that person definitely does need to have a therapeutic support, some type of a space that they're able to go have an outlet for their emotions. Because like we just heard earlier today, boys don't cry. 14-year-olds, they suppress it. They don't talk about their emotions. They got to talk about it somewhere. And I know the family. I mean, I know the mom really well, so I know that's what she really, really wanted to do. But it's easier said than done sometimes. So next week, Eileen, we will talk about how Lynn, the mother, wanted to engage with family therapy and kind of what their experience was with it. Hossein, which is a father of one of our program participants. I acknowledge you, Ed, for your persistence and commitment to recovery and transformation. Keep it up one day at a time. And this is, Ed, you said you're 35 years old right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is for everyone watching this who has loved ones that are older in our program. They're not the 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Recovery does not have a timestamp. Recovery does not have a certain age you're supposed to do it by. Recovery can happen in any moment, including this moment that we're watching. Counselor Jim, good job, Ed. Never give up and don't beat yourself up. It'll be all right. Let's see what Mr. Julian said here. Julian's long-winded in his comments. Great job, Ed. As someone who watched you grow and the ability to overcome your last relapse and use that as a motivator to become the man you are today, is truly an honor to see you grow. Keep crushing it, brother. I'm honored to call you a friend and a colleague. How about that?
Julian.
Yeah, so that was it right there, man.
Awesome.
Yeah, Ed, this was so great. Feel free to share this with anyone you want. Feel free to share it with your loved ones. I really look forward to having your mom next week. I did not know that today was the 20-year anniversary of the losing of your father, so I do not think that was a coincidence. Even though I didn't know that date, I think that happened for a reason. And I will tell you this right now, and I actually said this, and I got some chills down my spine. Your father's watching this moment, man, and I don't know who he was or I don't know anything about him, but I do know that in this moment that he's feeling very fulfilled and very proud of the man you are. And next week, I can't wait to talk about how you're going to start impacting our little circle of Buckeye Recovery Network and the families that we touch in your little in your new capacity. So awesome. Love and appreciate you, man. 13, 14 months is a huge deal, especially after 11 months. And look at it this way. You combine both of those two together and you just had a rough 24 hours in between. So it's been really good. Did you have fun doing this?
I had a great time. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on here, Parham.
Right on, bro. Stay on for a sec. I'm just going to log out of here. Everyone else, love and appreciate you guys. Thank you for another wonderful week of supporting us, and we'll see you next week.